Okie dokie. Now, finally, the towers. I'm going to paint these towers. And these things, it seems like ages ago I built these. Well, it was a good year ago. They're 99% done. The only thing I haven't done on these is maybe a little beacon on the top, which I can add later. I mean, it's a point where you're doing so much that you just got to just get on with it. Jeez. You know, I'm just tired of waiting on these things. There's these hydraulic rods, right? They pop out. They're plastic. I could use aluminum, but this clevis here, I don't know if you can see it really, but goes into a, actually it turns the other way, but it goes into a big flange, and there's a bar that goes from this side to the other side, and these are hydraulic cylinders, and they work backwards. They pull. They pull up like that, and they lift the whole barge up and down according to the tide to line up to the ferry or the barge, rail barge, right? Like that's how it works. It's quite an ingenious design when you think about it. One on each side, right? And these towers they've changed. Like when they first built these were white. Now they're black. You know, these were black. Now they're kind of rusty looking. These springs, they're these spring shock absorber type things on the hydraulic cylinder. I guess it's kind of just from the weight of the thing. It just kind of, you know what I mean? It's not hard and rigid here. It is down here, but it just, you know, it's built that way. It's kind of cool. Now these are the lamp standards. I made of brass. I'm going to paint those separately, and they just pop into the base, so that's easier to paint those. Plus they're drilled out through and they run down these pipes, so I can run LEDs to them. Then there's here's my favorite right here. The windsock that I made from toilet paper over a piece of plastic. I just carved a piece of plastic from a thick piece of evergreen, and then I just used water and toilet paper and just slipped it off when it was dry, because it's like a funnel shape, right? It'll slide off easy. I used a little piece of wire and put it on a little piece of you know, 1/8 rod or whatever. That's my favorite part of the whole model. That's what happens when you build a lot of models. You know, you find quirky things that you like the most that seem insignificant, right? So that's separate as well. I can paint that, and that just pops in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a lot of the underside of this like dark black, almost umber, for all the shadow. I'll show you a photo, like a couple of photos. Like you'll see all the dark that I'm talking about that I like to paint into a model, okay? Okay, so you can see that, right? So that would be, like in the photo, would be this one here. And of course, there's little kiosks that I have yet to build. They're just small little models. They're different, one on each side. Actually, no, it wouldn't be that one. This one would be on the outside left. And as the ramp goes up and down, the kiosk is fixed, and it's lined up with this ladder. So I'll build that last because I'm worried about them getting broken, and they would have. So they'll be the very last little fine detail part that I'll do. I'll just mount them on the side of the ramp. So, and then I'm going to paint these silver, a sort of a silver gray, and then mask them off. Somebody asked me, like, how do you paint something like this with an airbrush without masking? Well, you don't have to mask everything. You can do a lot of stuff in close with an airbrush that you don't have to worry about overspray if you choose your colors right and the process that you do. Because a lot of times, like, the way I like to paint, like, I like to paint the stuff you don't see. Like, when we look at the real world prototype, you're always going to have reflections from other surfaces onto other surfaces of different colors that you don't notice, but they're there though. And they soften all the, you know, the individual aspects of the subject, right? And which is oftentimes in shadow. So you have different colors of shadow. So shadow's not just black or dark gray. Like, I like to use umber because it has a warmer kind of tone to it. That's just my style and my choice. So you'll see that in the model, the whole model, is you'll see a lot of umber in all the shadows, which brings it to that kind of warm kind of feeling. Rather, if you used blue-gray for shadows all the time, you would have a cooler kind of look. So that's my method to my madness there. So that's what I'll do, is I'll lay out the shadow base, and then I'll start working in some lighter grays and whites, and then of course tide marks and so on, and all the fun stuff, right? Okay. So these are the lamp standards, and what I've done with these is I'm painting them with JN Gray XF12. I really like this gray. If you haven't tried it, it's got a greeny, bluey hue to it. It's just a really nice color, like a you know, that you can build upon, I guess, in that sense. It's just I just love it. I use a lot of JN Gray, so just painting these off. Like all the lamp standards are going to be like this, and then they're going to be I'm going to mask off the top foot or two or so, and they're black. They'll be flat black. That'll be cool, eh? The gray, then the black, you know. And then they're hollow brass tubes, so I can run really small wires, LEDs, and I drilled a hole to run the lamp inside the lamp box. So, and down, you know, into the barge ramp. So that's what I'll do. I'll just base these out gray first, and then move on from there. Okay, so these hydraulic rods, so they just pop out. Okay, so I'm not going to leave those in to paint them, because I wanted them to be a little bit adjustable, so that when I adjust the beam, the I-beam that goes across the bottom of the girders to lift the ramp up and down, I can adjust this so it fits nice. And I might just use aluminum, like some aluminum rod, which is the same diameter as this, which might look kind of cool. And I can squeeze it with a pair of pliers and then drill a hole for the clevis if I want. So those will just go aside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start cutting in the shadow now with this raw umber. Okay. Which is, as you know by now, most of you, it's black and brown together. And I just want to get underneath. I want to get all inside of there. Again, the beauty of an airbrush is you can do that. And if you're using thin paint and you catch parts in the way, you're not going to get a big buildup of paint. That's another reason for using thin paint. And another thing I want to say about the airbrush at this point too, like I get it when you paint, like spray a car or a larger surface that, you know, you're back more and you're putting on more paint. But the power of an airbrush is to be able to get in close, like this. See, like that's the whole point of learning to use an airbrush, so you can cut in areas, you know, that you could never do with a spray bomb. Like you can't do that with a spray bomb. Like you'll just flood the whole model and kill everything, you know. So like that's the advantage. So you can get into all those little fins in there and the springs that I built, right? And you know, you come back and put another coat on. Just get a little bit in there first, right? All up underneath the cabinets there. Ladders, you know, I-beams. Okay. Okay, so you can see I've painted one of these now, dark umber. Not black, but close, right? I just, like I say, I like the umber because it reflects a bit of light. Like it has already kind of a warmth to it. Okay, because black is not a color, umber is. So why do this? If the towers are going to be white, well, why don't you just paint them white and put a wash on it and be done with it? Well, because I won't be able to paint in the shadow. So I paint in all the shadow, right, as one color, completely black it out, as the term is, right? And then I'll start spilling up white onto the model, like light, spilling light, spraying light onto the high points of the model, letting the white overspray go into wherever it wants to. I mean, I couldn't imagine painting this white and then trying to cut in all the shadow. Like you'd never be able to do it. Like it would look horrible, right? So that's the kind of reverse kind of methodology there. Like that's why the method is what it is, and that's why it's so good, because I can shoot white on this for as long as I want, and underneath these beams is going to be shadow. There's going to be some white that'll get on it, but that's perfect though. That's what you want, right? So you're painting like in the photo. Like if you were to look at them from this, well actually it would be as you're going down the ramp to the end, that this is like, this would be on the right side, but you know, like you'll see, I'll just show you the photo one more time. Right, so if it's all white, it just looks like that. It just this white opaque plastic model. But if you black it out first and then start laying on your white and let the shadow come through, let it be the basis of your whole painting method, then you already are off on the right foot, because you're going to have all that built in already. And then you can put washes in at the end, like for in and around all these, like the girders in here and rust, like that all comes later, right? You know, so what I'll probably do now is I'll probably paint this silver now, or aluminum, and then I'm going to tape that box off, because it'll be easier for me to do it now and then mask it off and peel it later as I'm shooting white everywhere. Okay. So I'm going to paint this control box silver. I got a bit of gray in it, 50-50 IPA Tamiya. And silver always looks better when you paint over black, or in this case raw umber. It just seems to reflect better when it's on the surface. So if you're going to paint silver and you want it to reflect better, paint the base coat black. And then what I'll do is I'll just mask that off and then retouch up the umber on there, and then leave the tape on till the end, and then just peel it away once it's all painted white and other stuff is done on this. So. Okay, so I have some XF19 Sky Gray now, lighter. Okay, I'll put some on here, see the difference. Now, did you thin your paint? I know I harp on that, but this is the problem that everybody has, or not everybody, but a lot of people, I'm meaning people that are on the fence with airbrush. One of the main laments they have is, oh, it clogged up. Well, the paint's too thick. It's just simple. There's no other reason for that. It's just too thick. And everybody does this that starts off. They just can't seem to get out of that. I don't know where that indoctrination comes from, actually. Like, I don't know where. Thin the paint. Thin it more than you even think is reasonable. And then shoot it on paper. Practice on paper before you go on to the model. Anyway, watch closely as this starts to lighten. I'm going to turn this. Actually, I'll move one of these off of here. And just watch, like, it's gradual, right? But so see the paint as sunshine. So, you know, like light over the darkness, right? Okay. See how that's starting to lighten up now? The top of these pillars, the top of the cylinder, top of the railings, right? That's the idea, the method that you practice and you learn, and then you end up, and you're not touching underneath, because any overspray is going to gradually flow and current and get under there, but not so heavy as you render the whole thing white, where you have the light and shadow developing, right? So it's letting all the layers show through, the first initial layers, letting them bleed through a little bit. That's the art of painting light and shadow. The first dark layers you put on, you don't never completely cover over. You slowly, gradually build up thin layers over top and let some of that show through. And naturally it'll be stronger on the very bottom of these rails. Like on the very bottom of, see? It's all dark in there, but it's all light here, see? And practice with your airbrush doing tiny amounts of paint. Tighten the trigger up if you're slipping and you're hitting the floor with it too easily. And once you get a feel for it, it'll all be natural for you. Okay, so now all the base white is on. Okay, I'm probably going to stop here now, and I'll seal coat this with Vallejo matte just to prep for just doing washes and maybe a little bit of highlighting. So let me just turn the light off for a second just to show you something a little bit better. Okay, so, you know, this is kind of what it looks like on the layout. Like, you don't, I mean, depending on the lighting, see, it changes everything, doesn't it? See? Off, on, off, on. I like to view things this way when I paint them, because when you go like this, right? Imagine if that was just spray bombed all white, how horrible that would look. There would be no real depth to it. But that's the reason for the madness of layers and never quite painting it white. Now, where you would use pure white would be like if the railings were white, then you would use pure white to pick out the top of the railing, the top, like all your flat surfaces, the top of this hydraulic cylinder, the top of these railings, the top of these columns, maybe the top of these railings, and then just let me show you underneath here. You'll see the dark. See? Let me put the light on again for you. Okay, see that? See the shadow? It's painted in, right? And when you move around a model, even depending on whatever the lighting is, like even if you don't have good lighting, you're still going to have that depth with lighting or without. That's the reason behind that, right? That's what gives it that extra scale illusion that we're all after as modelers, really, right? At the end of the day. Unless you just want to paint otherwise, that's fine, but So there's the base coats there, see? See what I mean? It's got that scale white. You know, these side girders are done very similar way. If I'd have painted them pure white, it just wouldn't. I mean, you can do that too. You can paint them pure white if you want and then just put washes on these. There's that way too. Like, this isn't the only way of doing it, but it's just the way I like to do it because because I can control and read and interpret what's happening, because I'm always after letting the darker colors to bleed through and then going back again, bringing it back, like highlighting. So far I think I'm pretty happy with that so far. So So at this point, I think I'll just add this. Like, what you're seeing here is all like algae. It turns black. But in this case, I'm just using sea gray. And I'm just really watered down. I'm just flicking it with a brush with lots of water on it so that, you know, they run out a bit. I don't want it to be too splattery looking, but a little bit of it around, you'll see, like right in here, you see. I like that. And then some of the stuff I don't like that got higher up, that's maybe too opaque or too spotty looking, I can just etch out with the airbrush. So I'm using like concrete, 71.131 concrete Vallejo and 71.053 dark sea gray, two of my favorites, right, on the same palette, and two separate blobs with a bit of water bouncing back and forth, just letting things happen on their own, right? But like I say, the dark sea gray is just a great color because it'll simulate black but never be quite black. And I just keep flicking it on until it starts to dry and starts to run out the way I like it. Because these towers are really, they're really weathered down. Like, even when they were new, the water build up and I'm not worried about what's pooling down below because that's going to be a dark cyanide brown anyway with the wet, like the muck that dries, like you see on the barge piles, right? Yep. Okay, so I just want to talk about the art of masking, or the task of masking, or whatever. I mean, it's not really an art form. I mean, it's just probably different for everybody. But somebody mentioned a ways back that you know, how are you going to paint these towers with the different colors, like if they're all built, rather than build the ladder separate, paint them, glue them, attach them on. I like to build everything completely if I can, because I get a good bond on everything, and I don't have to scrape paint and, you know, stuff like that. Then I can really check the integrity of the model before I paint it, make sure everything's attached well. So all I did here was just stuff some paper in behind. You know, the one thing you want to be careful that you don't, you know, damage things when you unmask or whatever, but So I didn't paint the railings completely yellow, opaque. I just kind of shot some random yellow around, because there are photos where the yellow just wore off eventually. So I wanted a hint of yellow, see? So there's a tiny little bit of bleed there, just a tiny bit, which I can easily get with the airbrush or with just a traditional brush. I can dab that out with, you know, just a traditional brush with a little wash or even white. Okay, so you can see, like, around 2010, prior to the period you know, that I'm modeling, they kind of looked like this. They had some yellow on it. I thought that would be a nice touch anyway, just the yellow safety railing kind of deal. So, and then this angles was yellow too, but I'll add some rust in here, and probably some rust on these railings. There's a fair bit of rust going on up here too. And just, well, since we're on this topic, I know later on, like now, these are black, but earlier on these hydraulic cylinders were white. I don't know why that is, if they replaced them as being black or they just oxidized over time. I'm not really sure. But and then there's these cabinets, but I'm not going to unmask that yet, because I might have to come in here with the airbrush a little bit more. I don't want to risk getting any paint on this silver that I did. But you can see there too that the tide marks are a little bit different on these. There's some black, and these are all earth tones as well that I added in. So pretty happy with these so far, the way they're starting to turn out. Okay, so this is what I call chasing down unwanted blemishes, anomalies, speckles, things that maybe you might find to be a bit too strong. Like in this case, the splattering that I did with the Vallejo Dark Sea Gray. Like, I like it down here. I can live with that. But I want to show you with just some very thin, just Tamiya flat white. When I say thin, like, you all know the default, like you fill the bottle up, right? You fill the initial bottle up from the factory. That's your pigment. And then when I say 20%, I mean 20% of that into whatever ratio I indicate with IPA. So this is probably 10% pigment from the topped up original new bottle to 90% IPA. So it's very thin, okay? And you can see that you can just build it up and tone it down. See that? And every subsequent pass will basically blot it out more. And I like the look of it because it's subdued, and it doesn't look like it's actually been speckled on. So you can get in here. There. See this all in this here? Watch. Okay. Tone that down, those little tiny flood marks, or just splotches, you know, that, I mean, you might desire that kind of thing, but not in every case. Like here, you can see it got a little out of hand, that splashes upwards. Right there. To make some of that go away. Okay. And then I'll do the same down on the base here, that same tide mark from the barge piles. And I'll put dark cyanide brown or gray on the bottom just to match. even though there's more black or dark gray stains on the bottom of these upright columns for some reason. Maybe it's due to the shade, I'm not really sure, but the tide can do funny things. Okay? Okay, so I'll just demonstrate here how you can clean up the inside of these steel I-beams here. See how I put a wash in there? But I want a little bit of shadowy kind of grit, because they are like that. But I can come in here with very thin paint and a tiny amount and just slowly etch it in. Now remember, this is just a cheaper airbrush. This is a lower end airbrush. It's not an upper end Iwata. But you've got to have a decent compressor so you can get some pressure behind your airbrush. It's not the high pressure in the sense that you shoot a lot of paint. You need high pressure to shoot tiny amounts of paint. That's just the way it is. And I have, like I shoot 40 psi, 50, 60 psi, but I only put the paint on the model. I don't shoot 80% of it into the air. I mean, it's not a high volume, low pressure air gun, but you can control the amount of paint with high pressure that goes onto the model and not into the air. Okay, that's why I can paint indoors like this with a fan and an open window, because I mean, you can see the amount of paint that I'm putting on, right? It's practically undetectable. But if you open up the floodgates, you're going to end up with a cloud in your workspace. And that's the wrong way of doing it. I don't normally say that. I'm not usually dogmatic about things like that, but that is for sure. Airbrushes are not designed to do rattle can work or HVP work or whatever. HVLP. They're for doing fine work like this. Yeah, you can paint broad surfaces if you want. Open up and come back more, but generally when you're doing this kind of work, like avoiding masking, not always, but a lot of times you can. You need a decent compressor. And it'll transform, a decent compressor will transform any airbrush just as in the same way thin paint will. Okay.